Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are joining us from. My name is Sam. I am an assessment and technology consultant. I provide support to our healthcare, government, private practices, and higher education customers in Canada. I'm joined today with my manager, Liz. Liz, did you want to just quickly introduce yourself as well?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Liz Gross. I am the National Manager for Pearson Assessments Canada. My background is I'm a school psychologist, and I'm just really excited to have some time to share about WIAT-4 Canadian and Q Interactive.
Thanks, Liz. Yeah, so today's topic is administering the new WIAT-4 Canadian on Qneractive specifically. We found that there's a lot of customers out there who are using this as the reason to move over to Qneractive, but there might be a lot of you who are still uneasy or just want to see what it looks like on Qneractive and what kind of benefits do you get from using the WIAT on Qneractive. So the goal for today will be to highlight the benefits of using Q Interactive versus traditional print, and then to demonstrate as much as we can on the WIAT itself over on Q Interactive. So the way that we're going to do that, so the agenda for today is number one, we're going to do a quick overview of the WIAT-4 Canadian, talk about what changes are to be expected, and then we'll go over and talk about Q Interactive itself and go through some of the digital efficiencies specific to the WIAT-4 Canadian on Q Interactive. We'll do a quick live demo, and then we'll talk about some considerations for implementation. And after all that, hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for questions as well. So please, as a reminder, if any questions come up, feel free to type them in the chat box. Our team will either answer them live in the chat box or we'll hopefully bring up a few questions ourselves and we can answer them live on the webinar. So with that said, I'm going to pass it over to my manager, Liz, who will talk about the WIAT-4 Canadian and some of the changes that have occurred. Go ahead, Liz.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sam. I'm really excited to share with you guys some of the specifics of what you can expect with the WIAT-4 Canadian if you haven't already made the jump. Because this is just really a textbook example of when research can be translated into practice. So this little graphic here is a high-level overview of really what is new and big with the WIAT-4 Canadian. Whether you're using it on paper, digitally on Q Global, or fully digitally on Q Interactive, you can expect 4 new subtests, which are going to fundamentally transform the way that you're able to assess, particularly for reading difficulties. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides. But through these new subtests, we're able to quantify critical skills that research has shown us are really important for students, what they need, foundational skills, what they need for fluid word reading. And then these are going to help us, better understand the why a student is struggling with reading. These 4 new subtests then roll up into 5 new composite scores. Additionally, essay composition now has automated scoring, both on Q Global and Q Interactive. So for anybody familiar with that essay composition subtest on the WIAT-3, you know the pain of scoring those essays and what an efficient update this is to now have access to automated scoring. The scoring rules for sentence composition have also been simplified, which is going to lead to some greater efficiencies as well. And then finally, another big change with the WIAT-4 Canadian is the inclusion of the dyslexia index score. So this used to be a separate purchase with the WIAT-3 Canadian, and now it is rolled into the WIAT-4 Canadian and is included on Q Global and Q Interactive reports. So I'm guessing many of you on the webinar today may have some experience with the WIAT-3. So this graphic gives a really good breakdown of what's new and changed going from the 3 to the 4. The age range is going to be pretty much the same. It is the same going from the 3 to the 4. It's quite large. It's applicable in a variety of settings. It's been about 14 years since the update or since the WIAT-3. So this is a really highly anticipated update. These new norms do allow for scores that are reflective of today's population. And the other thing to call out with that is that this norm group is post-COVID, which is pretty unique in standardized assessment currently. Administration and scoring continues to be very flexible. There's a variety of options available. We're obviously going to be highlighting Q Interactive today and all of the efficiencies, but do know that there are options with the WIAT-4. It's available paper pencil, full hand scoring to digital scoring through Q Global, fully automated on Q Interactive. And if you're with a school district that subscribes to the digital assessment library, that unlimited subscription models for schools, WIAT-4 Canadian is available through that as well. For subtests, you'll notice that there are now 19 subtests, whereas the WIAT-3 had 16. The thing to note that is consistent between these two is that although there are 19 subtests on the WIAT-4 Canadian, just as it always was, WIAT is meant to be administered flexibly. So you may not actually give all 19 subtests to your client or student. Really, it's quite common to maybe start with a standardized battery, maybe one that looks like at the total achievement score, and then diving in to areas that require a little bit more in-depth assessment. And this is one area that you will notice some efficiencies with Q Interactive, because on Q Interactive, you only pay for the subtest that you actually administer. Whereas with paper, you buy a protocol, it has all 19 subtests. And so that is one difference already that you can note between paper pencil versus Q Interactive. The other thing that I'll note is that even though the WIAT-4 has more subtests, there were quite a few steps that were taken to cut down on the administration and scoring time with the WIAT-4 Canadian. So on the 3rd edition, that total achievement composite, all the subtests that rolled up into that, it took about an hour and a half to administer the WIAT-3 Canadian. Now on the WIAT-4 Canadian, the total achievement score can be obtained typically in less than an hour. Moving on to some other changes. So with that new subtest configuration and the 4 new subtests, as I mentioned, there are now 5 new reading and writing composites, including 2 processing composites. So orthographic processing and phonological processing are now included on the WIAT-4 Canadian. And then we have clinical validity studies looking at academically gifted, mild intellectual disability, and specific learning disability, and a validity study with the WISC-5. All right, so now we'll dive in a little bit deeper into those 4 new subtests. So the first new subtest on the WIAT-4 Canadian, the phonemic proficiency subtest, it's also going to be the first one that's administered in the order of administration. It includes 3 sections, and it's designed to measure the speed and accuracy of phoneme manipulation. Now that speed piece is what is key and unique about the WIAT-4 Canadian. This type of measure, standardized measure that includes both a speed and an accuracy of phoneme manipulation tasks is not currently available, to my knowledge, on any other standardized achievement test. And it really gives us new insights that shed light on why a student might be struggling with reading. So we know from updates in reading research, and this is where I was talking about the research to practice piece, that as individuals are learning to read and we want them to read fluently, it's really essential that they are able to engage in orthographic mapping, or in other words, mapping sounds onto the print representations of those letters and syllables. They have to be able to do those skills, and research has shown us that the prerequisite skills to do that really go back to these early reading phonemic and phoneme manipulation skills. And research has shown that not only is being able to do the skills important, but being able to do them quickly, effortlessly, easily, having instant access to those skills is what's needed. So previously, with measures that only look at accuracy, it would be possible for a child to do well on that accuracy task, but then they're not able to pull it all together to get to, oral reading fluency scores that are within that average range. And there's a gap, right, in the data. For those specific situations, this phonemic proficiency piece that includes the speed is really, really key.
We'll jump into, so if Liz does come back, it sounds like I just got a message here and she may have lost power, so I apologize for that. If she does come back, we will resume where she left off. But in the meantime, what I will do is I will start the presentation in regards to the Q Interactive platform, and then yeah, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so this is what assessments used to look like, or if you haven't adopted Q Interactive yet, this might be your office right now. So as you can see at the top left corner, there's these big sort of heavy test kits. When you're doing the actual administration with your clients or your students, there's a lot of moving parts to these assessments. And so sometimes it's a struggle to organize yourself, especially like a test like the WIAT that has, an administration manual, a stimulus book, response booklets, a record form. Some other tests might have additional manipulatives on top of that. So you can see there's a lot of test components to have to juggle. The other thing is when you're doing traditional print assessments, you are also handwriting a lot of your observational notes. So your record form may be super messy with lots of sort of little notes here written there. Your actual desk could have a whole lot of assessment materials on them, and then your filing cabinet just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And so if you compare that to what assessments look like today using Q Interactive, as you can see, it is a lot more clean, it is organized, it is efficient, and it's a more enjoyable experience for both the examiner and the examinee. So in this picture here, what you are seeing is the examiner reading subtest instructions to her client. And then from there, she's controlling what items the examinee sees on her iPad. She's also using her stylus to be able to write notes or verbatim responses, and doing all that while keeping the examinee engaged. So I have a short video here that kind of highlights exactly what Q Interactive is. I find it's a helpful video to show for anyone who's new to Q Interactive. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. If there happens to be no sound, if someone can just let me know.
How can you simplify your assessment process, pay only for what you need, save time, get immediate results and insights, all while making the process more interactive and engaging for the client? Welcome to Q Interactive, where assessment meets innovation. Q Interactive is your administration manual, stimulus book, record forms, notepad, stopwatch, audio recorder, and writing assistant, all on one iPad. Here's how it works. Everything takes place on two iPads, which are seamlessly and securely connected, allowing you to easily manage assessments. The examiner uses one iPad to administer instructions, record responses, score, and take notes while controlling visual stimuli. The client uses the other iPad to view stimuli and record their responses, making the process more engaging and interactive. With real-time scoring, you can instantly view subtest scores, giving you immediate insights. Your data is encrypted and securely stored on your iPad, then synchronized and transferred over a secure and encrypted connection to our servers in AWS, protected by their strongest security protocols available. So, what are the advantages of Q Interactive? Customize your battery. Use only the subtests you need. Reduce costs. Only pay for what you use. Reduce paper usage. Less clutter means more time to focus on clients. Travel light. No more bulky test kits. Access new assessments. Get the latest tools as soon as they are available. Increased engagement. Keep examinees focused. Streamline your workflow. Enjoy real-time scoring. Join the thousands who have moved to Q Interactive and discover how it can transform your assessment experience. Learn more and start your free 30-day trial today.
All right. So why Q Interactive? So before I jump into sort of more general reasons why someone would move to Q Interactive today, let me just say something about the WIAT specifically. So some of you may be in the boat that you were waiting to use up old forms for your WIAT-3 Canadian, and so this would be a good time to switch over to Q Interactive. Some of you may have already invested in a physical kit, and so you may not necessarily want to invest in something new, or maybe there's a little bit of fear in adopting something new. And so if you are one of those people today, hopefully I will provide some good reasons to switch over today. And I will also point out, and we'll mention this at the end of the webinar as well, is that for anyone who's new to Q Interactive, we do highly recommend that you try our free trial, which provides you with 30 days unlimited access. It really gives you the chance to try before you subscribe. Now, the other thing I want to mention too about the WIAT is that it's probably our most used Q Interactive assessment. It's used, by school boards, a variety of healthcare, environment, as well as private practices. So today, I think there's a lot of you who might be at the point where you're ready to switch over, okay? So these are some of the benefits to switching over to Q Interactive. So we can divide these by benefits to the students and the clients that you're assessing. So you will see reduced errors in scoring. So this is because Q Interactive has rule assistance. It's really guiding the examiner through the administration. You also get automatic scoring in a lot of cases, and overall subtest guidance. You'll also see higher engagement in evaluations. So this is because QI eliminates a lot of the clutter that you saw in that initial picture from before and really helps the examiner focus in on what matters most. You also have more time for report building. So this reduces the load on the examiner and helps them focus on their client. Again, because of the rule assistance and sort of the guided approach to Q Interactive. For the examiners, you will see time savings, not so much for the administration, because the administration is a standardized assessment, so that stays relatively the same, but you will see a lot of time savings when it comes to the scoring aspect of your tests. You also have the benefit of having 24-hour access and greater flexibility to test materials. As someone who has done a lot of report writing in the past, I love the fact that I am able to log in anywhere as long as I have an internet connection and instantly get access to the test manuals as well as the client's scores. And if I have to regenerate that report again because I don't have one on hand with me, I can do that with Q Interactive. And then finally, less back pain, more space in the car. So those who travel for their assessments know what this struggle is like. And then for organizations, you will see greater staff productivity. We list this because there's no more need to share test kits, so you don't have to wait on one of your colleagues to finish up an assessment. As long as you have your iPad and you're ready to go, you can go ahead and access the test materials and then administer your assessments. There's also a lot less waste and improved inventory management. So with Q Interactive, it is a subscription-based model and you pay for only the subtests that you administer. Whereas if you compare that to traditional print, you're going to be using one record form, one whole record form, regardless of if you're administering only one or two subtests or all subtests. And this is importantly true for the WIAT, because as Liz was mentioning earlier, the WIAT is one of those assessments that is incredibly flexible, and a lot of examiners will pick and choose which subtest they want to do based on the client that they have in front of them and they're presenting problems. And so QInteractive allows you to really just pay for what you use only. And then the last sort of benefit here that I have listed is that it's a more versatile investment. So as the video described earlier, you get access to the latest and greatest. So as long as you have an active subscription, any new assessments that we're working on and that we publish, you will have access to those. And so for now, we've got, the WIAT-4 Canadian, we have the WIAT-4 Canadian French that will be the next one to be published. And eventually we'll be publishing the WACE-5 as well on QInteractive. So a lot of good stuff coming, which will all be available on QInteractive. Now, customers who are new to QInteractive, they always ask me, so what is QInteractive? Is it an app? Is it something that I access on the computer? And the answer is it's a little bit of both, okay? So QInteractive has two components. There is what we call Central Dashboard and the QInteractive app, also known as the Assess app. And so what the Central Dashboard is, it's a web-based application that you can access on your computer or your tablet if you wanted to by going to qiactive.com. And this is where you're going to go to create new examinees, assign tests to them. It's also where you're going to be able to access any test materials or generate your reports at the end of an administration. And then if you compare that to the QInteractive app listed here below, this is an app that you would download and install from the App Store. It is an Apple-based app. So this means that you do require iPads in order to use QInteractive. And you're going to be administering your assessments using your iPad. So one for the examiner, one for the examinee. The app itself has really nice features, which hopefully we'll be able to go into more details today, but things like an integrated timer. It will have a notepad for you to be able to write observational notes, and it will have real-time scoring as well as guided prompts and rule assistance. So the number one feature that I like to highlight, there's actually a few of them. One of them is the role assistance option with QInteractive. So with role assistance, based on the person's age or grade, the QInteractive app will actually start you at the correct start point. This is very important, especially for the WIAT. I find that it's mostly helpful too in terms of items that have like set items for some of our reading measures. It might be a little bit confusing sometimes in terms of like, where am I supposed to actually start for this particular client? And so you will have the option to start at the grade or age appropriate item, but still giving you that control whether you want to start at an earlier item if you suspect that the child would have too much difficulty on the grade appropriate or age appropriate item. The other thing that's really nice about QInteractive is it will reverse items for you. So the reversal rules, as well as the discontinue rules, these are all things that you would typically have to remember at the top of your head, or you would have to refer to the record form. And a lot of subtests have different rules. And so it's a lot for the examiner to like remember these things as they're going through the administration, unless they've done the WIAT many, many times, it comes to them as second nature. But when you're just learning and you're new, like you would be for this new version of the WIAT, this is incredibly helpful. And so if they don't meet a basal for a particular subtest, it will ask you to reverse, and then it will bring you to the correct item in reverse order until that basal is met. Once they've hit that basal, it will resume to the correct item without you having to really think about doing so. And then, of course, with the discontinue rules, once you've hit the discontinue criteria for a particular subtest, it will ask you if you want to discontinue that subtest. It will also ask you if you'd rather just test the limits without affecting the scores, or if you've made a mistake, you can go back and edit your previous scores as needed. This is another feature here that I think a lot of examiners are really impressed by. It's the scoring as you go. So the view that you see here, there's two, is what the view looks like at the end of administration. And so this would be at the end of the WIAT-4 Canadian. You can see your index scores. You can convert them. You can see the percentile ranks. And then you can also view the composite scores in a graphical representation. I will also say that as you do each of the subtests, you do get your scores for each of the subtests as well. And then at the end of your administration, so this is included in your QU interactive subscription, is the ability to generate PDF formatted WIAT reports, as well as the parent report. This is something that wasn't previously available, so you can now generate a parent report directly into Q Interactive. And these reports will have score summary tables, graphical representation of those scores. It will also have a summary of qualitative observations, a summary of marked error analysis goal statements. And also, if you include it, you will have the ability achievement discrepancy analysis information. And just a heads up for this feature, the ability achievement discrepancy is going to be a feature that will become available on Q Interactive just a little bit later this summer. And Liz, are you back? You are back.
Yes,
Welcome
I
back.
am back. Apologies. We
No
lost
problem.
power and internet at my house briefly, but we're back on now. So yeah,
Awesome.
I did want to take a moment to talk about error analysis because that is something that's very powerful with the WIAT-4 Canadian, and Q Interactive allows for a lot of the error analysis to be automated and of course spit out on those beautiful digital reports that Sam was showing. So with the WIAT-4 Canadian, there's error analysis available for 10 subtests. And some of the subtests are in groups where you can look at a comparison of similar errors across different types of tasks. So, for example, oral discourse comprehension versus reading comprehension. You can look and see how they did on literal versus inferential questions, narrative versus expository texts. And then when you're comparing oral discourse, something auditory versus reading comprehensions, something they're reading in print, you can make a lot of really in-depth, analyses and see how they do in those different tasks, which can give some great ideas for intervention as well as accommodations. Sentence building and sentence combining. We're looking at semantics, grammar, capitalization, punctuation, internal punctuation. Essay composition has some of this error analysis too. For numerical operations versus math problem solving, it gets very in-depth looking at addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, 1, 2, 3-digit numbers across all of those tasks. So that can be really, really informative. And then word reading, pseudo word decoding, and spelling. There's 19 error categories that it can break it down into, talking about short vowels, silent vowels, schwa vowels, consonant blends. So really, really in-depth analysis is, the name of the game here with the WIAT-4 Canadian. And for many of these error analyses, those errors are already coded within the student's responses. For example, for reading comprehension, as you're completing each of those items, Q Interactive knows this was a literal question or this was an inferential question, and it derives those tables automatically. Others are going to require, some additional input from the examiner to really break it down into the different vowels and things like that. But it's very, very clean within Q Interactive how you can indicate those errors. In contrast to on paper where there's just more opportunity for error. So it really streamlines things and cuts down on any errors you might have. All right, and then going into how this contributes to intervention goal statements. So this 9 subtests on the WIAT-4 Canadian have intervention goal statements available. This includes both an annual goal as well as short-term objectives that would help the student meet that overall goal. So these are available both within Q Global and Q Interactive. The example we have here is for phonemic proficiency. So you can, add information about the student's present levels and what we want that student to achieve annually, and then the short-term objectives to get them there. So a great, it's towards the end of the digital reports available on Q Global and Q Interactive, and it's a great way to get started with that instructional planning. Alrighty, and so Q Interactive has been around for about 10 years or so, so we've had a great opportunity to get feedback from examiners.
The way children are learning today
play this
is
video.
no longer the way we learned. We still have the teacher at the front of the class and students taking notes, but it's really changing. It's moving towards a more interactive approach. Children are learning a lot from the internet, from their peers. Teacher at the front of the class and students taking notes, but it's really changing. It's moving towards a more interactive approach. Children are learning a lot from the internet, from their peers. If our job as psychologists is to help children learn and become successful adults, then we need to be in that environment. We cannot be forcing children to keep learning with methods that no longer reflect their world.
Look up here. Look down here. Pick one here that goes with one here.
I've noticed that children, when you put an iPad in front of them, not only are they more engaged with the tablet, but also I'm more engaged with them because I have less things to control.
Look at these pictures. Which one here goes here? Right, let's try another one.
With something like Q Interactive, for example, I can see the score right there and then, which helps me determine if I need to do another assessment. So that's very practical, and I see that as a big time saver as well. Also, the ability to pick and choose from different batteries. I can definitely configure my battery in a very customizable way so that it works for that one child.
Look at these shapes. Neither of these shapes here is the same as any of the shapes here.
By allowing these interactions and a closer observation of the child's performance and the child's strategies, then we can provide better recommendations. Ultimately, the benefit of these time savings and also of these method that more closely reflects the reality of children's learning is that I can help more children, and I can help them in a way that reflects their world.
Awesome. So that's what, that's a lot of the things that psychologists and examiners have noticed in the many years that Q Interactive has been out. But we also always get the question, like, what does the research say? So as part of the development process, we've actually conducted several equivalency studies. Many of them are test specific, and those are all posted on our website. But I'm also, like, as a clinician practitioner myself, always very curious, like, what does the external research say about it? So I included some additional studies that researchers have looked at Q Interactive. What are the results of incorporating this either within practice or within training programs, graduate training programs. And so Clark and colleagues explored the implications for Q Interactive in training programs, and they found that graduates have a reduced testing and training time, so they're picking up these new assessments a little bit more quickly, decreasing or even eliminating administration and scoring errors. So some of what Sam was illustrating in terms of really guiding new clinicians through the basal and ceiling rules will eliminate a lot of administration errors, and of course, scoring errors as well, converting raw scores to standard scores and percentiles and things like that, all automatically within Q Interactive. Young and colleagues did a similar study, but they also found, just in terms of self-report, that digital assessment freed up the examiners to better attend to child's taking behaviors. So removing some of those logistical components to doing standardized assessments really opened examiners up to being more observant of how the child behaves when they encounter certain tasks, things like testing anxiety or, fidgeting behaviors and things like that. The examiner can be much more in tune to because they're not so involved with some of the more logistical pieces of assessment. And then another one at the end here, a mixed method study comparing graduate students on paper versus Q Interactive. Really got some good in-depth data there. 84% fewer administration errors and 71% fewer scoring errors when using Q Interactive. New clinicians still may make mistakes that require, clinical acumen and things like that. So this paper is really good if there's anybody on the webinar today that is involved with training programs. This is a great one that talks about the pros and the cons and kind of lessons learned to incorporate within a training program that can include Q Interactive, but still guiding new clinicians in picking up the clinical pieces as well. So lots of really great resources out there for you all. And so with that, I think we are ready to launch into a Q Interactive demo. So I'm going to hand it back to Sam.
Thanks, Liz. And if I can just ask you to get the deck ready so that when we resume back, you can take over again, Liz, that would be great.
Yep.
So we'll show, thanks, Liz. We'll do a couple things here today. So we're going to showcase both the dashboard and the app itself. So those are the two components of Q Interactive, which is what I was mentioning earlier. So I'm at qiactive.com. I'm going to go ahead and log into my single sign-in option here. And so the first thing that you will see is your main dashboard. So a few things that I want to point out here. So the message center at the top here sometimes gets overlooked quite a bit. It is incredibly important. So any sort of communication pieces that we want to push out to customers, you will see a message here. So you'll see, for example, here there's a message about the new WIAT-4 Canadian now available on Q Interactive. But it will also have information about your renewal, upcoming renewal. So if you're running low on subtests, if there's any planned downtime or anything like that, this is where the information would be posted. You'll also see any recently active clients at the bottom left here, any recently active assessments. And if you've created any favorite batteries, like let's say the WIAT total achievement score, you could favorite that battery and just make it a lot easier for you to quickly assign that battery to a specific client. The next tab that you'll see is the client tab. And so the client tab is where you go to create new examinees and assign assessments to them. I'm just going to wait until this loads up a little bit. Some of the other features too is that you can create what's called a practice client. And the reason why I want to mention that is even though we do offer a free trial with unlimited usage, if you've already used up that trial, and you just want to go ahead and try out the new WIAT-4, for example, you can create what's called a practice client, and that will not charge you for any subtests that you administer. The only difference is that you won't be able to get any scores or generate a report at the end, but it does allow you to practice that administrations as many times as you wish. So when you go to the client tab, you'll see a list of all your clients. And if you click on one of them, you can see any assessment history from the past and then go look at the scores. The next tab is the batteries tab. So this will highlight all of the assessment tools that you have access to and that you're qualified to use. If you're subscribed to what's called our Max license, you would have access to the entire test library. Or for those who are subscribed in school boards for the digital assessment library, you would also have access to all of these. And you'll be able to see here that the WIAT-4 Canadian is listed here. One really neat feature that I like to use quite often is the filtering system. So if you know that you have a referral coming up and that you want to target certain areas, but you're not exactly sure which subtests you can do on a given, like on the WIAT, you can actually select these um, and then it will give you exactly which subtests you should do and how long it's going to take you roughly to administer these subtests. And if you're not familiar with some of the other tools that we have, you can also filter by domain. So for example, if you want to target speech and language, but you're not exactly sure what tests we have for that, you can go ahead and filter down. The next tab would be the assessment tab. And so what this does is it provides a visual of the workflow of all of assessments that you're currently worked on. So it will be divided up in a few sections you'll see in just a moment. Um, so for example, you will have the ability to view which assessments are being worked on, which ones are completed, and which ones are, waiting to be delivered to your iPad, which ones have been created but haven't actually been sent to the cloud. And so this is where you would be able to access all of that information. And then finally, the last tab would be the support tab. This is where you're going to see some really good information about how to use Qneractive. So everything that we're talking about here today, you can access a more detailed video within the Qneractive system. So we've got a really good tutorial video, and then we have some subtest specific videos as well. And then on the left side, you'll see there's a little button here that says test material. So if you scroll down to the WIAT-4, you'll see this is where you would access the administration manual, the technical and interpretive manual, scoring manual, and all of that good stuff. Now, you might not need to view these digital assets when you're doing an administration because a lot of that information is already pulled within the app, but it is nice to have as a reference in case you need to read up on certain chapters. Okay, just taking a look at the time. We've got about 15 minutes. Perfect. So I'm going to quickly show what the workflow would look like when you go ahead and assign a new assessment. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new client here. One thing to note is that you do not necessarily need to put a first name and last name. The required fields is that you either put in a name or a client ID or both. And even if you do decide to put in a name, you do not have to put the full name. A lot of clinicians I know will put first couple initials of first name and last name. Even though the data is secure, the servers are located in Canada, and all of that. It's just added protective measures to ensure that no personal identifiers are there. So once you've created your client, you can go ahead and create an assessment. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And one thing that I want to highlight too while we wait for this to load, it is taking a little longer than usual, um, is that some people will often ask me if you need to be connected to the internet in order to do an administration. So for this piece here, obviously you would have to be connected to the internet to prepare an assessment and send that over to the iPad. But it's important to note that once that assessment is loaded on the iPad, you do not need to be connected to the internet. So if you're doing assessments in remote locations where the Wi-Fi is a little bit spotty, that's fine. You can still administer your tests in offline mode. And then if there's ever a situation where, I don't know, the website is being a little funky, or maybe you're not able to access this website, you just have your iPads, you can create new examinees and new assessment sessions directly from the app. It's not your go-to method. It's sort of a backup just in case you're not able to assign a battery this way. But a lot of people have been waiting for that feature because it is helpful, especially if you're doing assessments over the weekend and maybe you just have your iPads in front of you and that's it. And you want to be able to quickly create a new assessment session in offline mode. So that is available to you. Okay, so from here, you would assign specific subtests to your client. I'm just going to go ahead and do the phonemic proficiency subtests. and assign that. You can save this as a custom battery if you'd like. I'm going to go ahead and name this assessment. New proficiency. I'm going to click finish. So what this does is it creates an assessment session and assigns it to the client. And then from there, as soon as this loads, I'll be able to send that over to the cloud and then have that loaded onto the iPad. And let me just make sure that I have my iPads ready to go. Okay, we're not going to wait for that. We will go straight to the iPad. Okay. So this is what the app looks like. One second, just going to open my notes. So a few things to point out here. So once you've opened the app and you've logged in using your username and password, you'll see a list of any tests that you've already done. Some neat features here that I want to point out is you can filter these by examinee, the title of the assessment, test date, or the status. You can also search for specific assessments that you've done. And if you're connected to the internet, you can go ahead and refresh this page. And what this will do is it will pull any tests that you've created and load it up onto the iPad. So we're going to go ahead and do this one right here, which I've created earlier. And so a few things to point out here is that you have information about the examinee. At this point, it is not too late to change some of this information. If you've made a mistake, you can change the birth date, the grade level. And what's also neat is it provides you some information about how long the assessment will take, when the start date is. And then from here, you see which subtests you have assigned. And it is not too late to remove some of these if you wanted to, or add some. You can pull from different batteries, or you can pull from the WIAT. So in our case, we're doing phonemic proficiency. You'll see that the duration has now went down to 13 minutes. And then we can go ahead and start this assessment. So what you see here is what we call the cover card. So a lot of people will ask, at what point am I charged for a subtest? So this is when you would be charged for a subtest. As soon as you swipe through the cover card of a subtest, Interactive considers it as being administered. And so it will deduct one subtest usage from your inventory until you run out of inventory, and then you just have to buy more subtest usages. So if you go ahead and swipe through, what you'll see is a demo item. And I will preface by saying that because of the structure of this webinar, we're unable to show a lot of the test items, unfortunately, but I do encourage you to schedule a time with your assessment consultant if you'd like to dig a little bit deeper and actually go through some examples of some of these items. What's really nice here is in blue is your instructions, and then in black is things that you would have to normally think about. So for this particular subtest, I would say listen carefully. You will hear an example first, and then I would play the audio files. So what you don't see on this screen right here is the examinee iPad. Right now, the examinee iPad would be a blank white screen. And then as soon as I press play, hopefully you
If I
hear
say
this.
toothbrush but don't say tooth, the word that is left is brush.
The audio actually plays on the examinee iPad, okay? Then this subtest requires a verbal response, right? So the person is responding to the item. So the other thing that is really neat about this subtest is you'll see this little red dot here at the top left corner. So this indicates that this subtest is being recorded. And this will happen for any subtest that requires a verbal response, where it might be helpful for you to go back to, after the administration is complete, to listen back to the recording in case you want to rescore a particular item. For the next part of the phonemic proficiency subtests, you would remove parts of the sound.
If I say card but don't say d, the word that is left is car.
And then for the next part would be substitution, where you're substituting parts of words or sounds.
The word can begins with k. If we change the k sound in the word can to f, then can becomes fan.
And then for the next part here would be reversals.
The word cat has 3 sounds, k, a, t. If we reverse the order of the sounds, t, a, k, then cat becomes tack. Think about the sounds, not the way the word is spelled.
A lot of people really like this, the fact that there are audio recordings for this particular subtest. Okay, so we are slowly running out of time, so I'm just kind of moving through these very quickly. What I do want to show as well is that once you're done in administration, you can go back to the central dashboard. And your results will be loaded back into Central. So what you can do here is view any of the scores directly within the Central dashboard, as well as create reports. So I'm just going to wait till this loads. While we wait for that, I will pull up a report. If you've used Q Global before to score the WIAT, it's the exact same report. So you'll have, your cover page, a summary of all your scores here for your subtests, your composites, a graphical representation of those scores. Total achievement composite standard score differences. So if you want to identify the strengths and weaknesses as it pertains to the total achievement score. So in this example, written expression, you can see that there is a significant base rate. So it might show that this is a weakness, whereas these ones here, basic reading and decoding, show a significant difference as well, but in a positive manner. So it might be a possible strength. Then you will get a summary of all the qualitative observations that you've made. So you'll see one here for different categories, including the essay composition. And then this is what Liz was mentioning earlier, the error analysis summary. So the phonemic proficiency one is automatically calculated for you based on whether you've given a 0, 1, or 2-point answer. So again, this subtest is really looking at whether examinees are giving an instant response or a non-instant response, and then what the percentage of correct answers have been. So this will summarize that performance right there. And a whole lot of other information as well that we don't have time to kind of go into, but this is incredibly helpful. At the end, you will also see your goal statements. And if you've selected it, you may also get the parent report at the end. I don't know if I included it in this one. I don't think I did. And then the discrepancy analysis if you've included a score for the WISC, let's say. If you don't want to generate a PDF report, you can also view all of these scores directly within the central dashboard. So you can quickly use this to write your report. Any notes that you've made will be listed here. And any additional observations, so in this case for essay composition, will be listed here. Okay, so I know that was a lot of information, so we're just going to jump right back into the PDF, sorry, the PowerPoint, Liz, if you can.
Yep, I will. Okay, please.
I just want to highlight again that we have a free trial for anyone who's new to Q Interactive, so you can sign up for a free 30-day trial. Sometimes there's a lot of questions about what iPads you can use. Of course, the newer the iPad, the greater. But if you have an older iPad, that should do. Just make sure that it's part of our iPad requirements. Really, the important thing is that the iPad screen is a standard size iPad, so not an iPad mini or not one of those gigantic iPad Pros. Especially for the examinee iPad, since that may modify the size of the stimulus item. So you don't want that. Next slide, please, Liz. So this would be, so maybe what we could do is put in the chat box a link to our free trial for those who are interested. And then go ahead, next slide. And the other thing too that we offer is a wide range of training offering. Some of them are free, such as this webinar that we're doing today, but we also have some paid training which goes into a lot more detail, and they're a lot longer, so we can cover a lot more information. So we do have in-person, on-site, or virtual training options for the WIAT-4. And then if you've already done one of these sessions and just want to get an extra hour with one of our trainers to ask a bunch of questions, you can also do that. And this particular offering is really exciting here. So we have a lot of training sessions coming up for the WIAT-4 Canadian. They are $109. So we have one coming up on April 30th, May 16, May 30th, June 11th, and June 26th. So for those who are looking for CE credits, you will get them for signing up, and it will go into a lot more details in terms of the changes to the WIAT-4. They are small groups. We kept them at 40, so it's a lot more interactive, and you get to ask questions directly to the trainer that we have. Okay, so you might wonder, how do I access those trainings? So if you go to our website and go to the WIAT-4 Canadian product page, one of the options that shows up is the training tab. So if you click on that, you'll be able to see all of these sessions. And then what you would do is just add them to your cart and go through the checkout process. So we're going to end it here. And just want to kind of highlight that we have a great team of assessment consultants. So if you do have any further questions and we didn't have time to cover them today, please reach out directly to them, and we can schedule a longer call or just answer any questions that you may have. If there are any questions in the chat box that have not been answered by one of our reps, we will go ahead and email you if we can, or connect with you to try to answer all of the questions. So I want to thank everyone today for being here. We're really excited to have this presentation and to help anyone sort of go and use CUNA Active for the first time. So I hope everyone has an amazing day, and we will be in touch soon. Okay, bye everyone.